Welcome to episode 3 of the Wild West Tennis Podast. I am your host, Elias Laradi, along with my beautiful co-host, Mr. Bradley Falkner. And today we actually have a very special guest. We have Mr. Steve Flink from the Tennis Hall of Fame. Mr. Flink, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, Elias, and nice to join you on your podcast. Looking forward to this.
We really appreciate it. It's very rare that we get a Hall of Fame tennis journalist on our show, especially on episode number 3. So we're delighted to have you. We really appreciate your time, out of your busy, hectic schedule. We know you're fresh off covering the U.S. Open, so we're going to touch on that a bit if we can. And first of all,
I've known your partner, Mr. Brad Falkner, a long time, so I think we should have a nice discussion about the game. So just fire away. I'm looking forward to your questions.
So you just spent 2 weeks at the U.S. Open, if that's correct me if I'm wrong. And yes. What did you think of the tournament overall, the men's side, the women's side, just your general thoughts on the tournament overall?
Well, I thought overall it was terrific because many of us have been waiting for Alcaraz to come of age. That's a strange thing to say about a 19-year-old, but I just mean that he was so impressive during the spring when he won in Miami and when he won again in Madrid. And a lot of people thought maybe he can win the French Open. He lost to Zverev there. And then Wimbledon, he was injured going in, didn't have great preparation, lost to Sinner there. And then he didn't have a great summer on the hard court. So there were some question marks surrounding him heading into the Open, but I thought it was just he took over that fortnight. Obviously, Serena Williams got a lot of attention because this is her last major and probably her last tournament. And naturally, everybody was really zoned in on her and could she make a run. And once she lost in the third round, though, it was really Alcaraz was the central figure in the event. And he really took it over. And I think the fans found him captivating. And sure enough, he recovered from match point down in the quarters against Sinner and beat Tiafoe in the semis and Ruud in the finals. And he has his first major title now, becomes the youngest U.S. Open champion since Pete Sampras in 1990 and the youngest at any Grand Slam event since Nadal in 2005. So I think it was a great thing for the game. A personality, such a beguiling young man and such an attractive player would win the U.S. Open to end the Grand Slam season. So in a nutshell, that's how I felt about the tournament.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. But we will for sure touch on Serena Williams, this being her last event. But I wanted to ask you, at the beginning of the year, did you see Carlos Alcaraz, a 19-year-old, becoming the world number 1 and winning a Grand Slam?
Well, very beginning of the year, not necessarily. But by early in the season, I was predicting that he would end the year at number 1 by the spring. Because by Miami, I felt he had a great chance because it was obvious that Djokovic wasn't playing as much, and he wasn't as motivated by that as he had been when he set the record number of weeks a year ago and when he ended the year for the 7th time at number 1. And Nadal dealing with all of his injuries, and you looked at all these guys, and Medvedev being a little in and out, and Zverev, you never know quite what to expect. And I felt that, yes, that the chance was there. And I also felt that the Open would be the logical place because he wasn't quite ready at Roland Garros, and that's Nadal's turf. And Wimbledon, he just doesn't have that much experience on the grass yet, and he came in a bit injured. But I felt all along that the Open would be the chance, and that could also be the springboard to getting to number 1. I'm a big believer in this kid, and I thought he thoroughly deserved the title.
I for sure agree with you guys. I actually watched a couple of his matches. The match against Sinner was incredible. I think it was over 5 hours, 15 minutes, 5 sets.
Yeah.
It's really rare we get matches like that. For have a 19-year-old world number 1, what does that mean about the game? Is the game trending towards the younger players now? We're talking about these next gen players. What's your sense on that?
Well, it's complicated. We've been waiting for the younger generation to arrive. We saw Medvedev get to the top. Zverev has been close. They're in their 20s. He's just an extraordinary and almost unique talent. And to have that kind of maturity. I mean, you mentioned the Sinner match. Perfect example. 5 hours and 15 minutes, 5 sets. He wins the first set and had 5 set points in the second set, had served for the third set, but didn't win either set. So he's down 2-1. Then he came from match point down in the 4th, came from a breakdown in the 5th, and he wins the match in 5. I mean, there's just, you can't, these are qualities, they're ineffable qualities that this young man possesses, that you can't teach what he has. His coach was not going to be able to go out Juan Carlos Ferrero and play those big points for him. It's something innate in him. And I'm just excited about him. Now, whether the other younger players, we don't know yet about the rest of it. Sinner was very impressive too. He's got a bunch of guys that are a few years older than him, 2 years older and up, that are also emerging as well. But I think he's the one that is going to set the pace. And while Djokovic will have still a couple of big years left, and hopefully Nadal has got, if his body will hold up, has got at least another year left. And so there'll be a fascinating picture for the next few years while Alcaraz tries to stay at the top, and Djokovic strives for more majors, Rafa strives for more majors, and Medvedev tries to come back to the top. Not to mention Zverev, who's been an underachiever so far, coming back from injury. We don't know entirely what to expect from him.
Steve, does it remind you at all of Pete in 1990? I mean, they're pretty close in age. Do you see the similarities
between Pete and Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, like Carlos, we knew about him more than Pete per se, but is there something that strikes you that
not as tennis? They're different types of players.
No, I don't mean that. No. I mean, emerging as such a force, and you knew back then, you had that feeling that Pete was the real deal.
Yeah, of course. No, yes, in a sense, it's a little different because Pete in 1990 was seeded 12th at the Open, and he'd had a good year. You got to put on some very good results to even be just outside the top 10. But he had not thought he was ready at all. The difference was Carlos really came into this tournament believing he could win it. Pete didn't believe that at the 90 Open, and suddenly he put all the pieces together and sort of reestablished he carved out an identity for himself. And then most of us knew, even though he had some struggles in the next 2 years, we knew that he was destined for great things ahead. Carlos kind of showed us more in the earlier stages of this year. There were more clues because of what he did on both the hard courts and the grass in the spring, so that he sort of set the stage for it. And he came in to New York as the number 3 seed. So it was a little bit different circumstances. However, similar kind of it factor with both, in the sense that you can't.
That's what
yeah, there's something extraordinary about their inner belief and their ability to put it all together and show poise on a big stage. In that sense, definite parallels. And by the way, some physical similarities, definite physical similarities between the 19-year-old Pete and Carlos Alcaraz. It was Scott Price, our mutual friend, Brad, from Sports Illustrated, who sent me an email on the eve of the tournament asking me, or actually early in the tournament, did I see the similarity? And I said, I hadn't thought of it until you brought it up. It couldn't be more true. Some of the mannerisms, and they're each of them in their own way, confident but not overconfident, and very reverential about the game and their feeling for the sport. So yes, in that sense, no doubt about it. But Carlos had set the stage for this maybe a bit more than Pete had in. So this was maybe a little less startling than that.
I meant to ask the question that Scott did. I mean, if I had his experience, I would have phrased it the way what Scott meant. That's what I was alluding to, because Pete kind of did come more out of nowhere. I mean, he was in the top 20 when he got into the Open that year. But Steve, you knew Pete had multiple majors in him. Can you project how many majors you see Carlos racking up?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that, barring injuries, I can't see him falling under 15. And I think there's potential for him to go a good deal higher than that, because you get on the board at 19. I mean, even if he had sort of a growing pains year next year and for some reason did not win one at 20, I wouldn't be surprised, which I don't expect will happen, by the way. I'm expecting he will get 1 or 2 next year. But even if he didn't, there's so many big years ahead for him from 21 all the way up to his early 30s, where potentially he's the kind of player that could be winning 2 a year for a long time. And he's going to be dangerous on every surface. So I say a minimum 15 for Alcaraz, and depending on how long he stays in the game, how motivated he is, he could take it higher than that.
And Steve, now I want to switch over to the women's side of the tournament.
Sure.
Iga Swiatek, she had an incredible beginning of the year. She went on a 37-match win streak. She was one of the. I think you would say she was one of the favorites.
Yeah.
But again, another story, like you said, was Serena Williams. Are you surprised at the fact that she was actually able to beat Kontaveit in the second round, but then lose that third round match?
No, I wasn't shocked. I mean, Kontaveit was nervous. Kontaveit had been in a slump. It's a little bit misleading that she would be seeded to. I'm not saying she didn't deserve it, because it's right off the computer ranking, so nobody's doing her any favors. But her results, the reason she was 2 was much more predicated on what she did at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, more so than the last 4 or 5 months. So she's been vulnerable recently. The timing was good for Serena to play her. I wasn't shocked. I thought going in, it was almost a toss-up match. And Serena did a good job to win that match. But I was also not shocked that it caught up to Serena against Tomljanovic in the third round, because she had not been well prepared for the Open. She had been gone for a year. She lost the first round of Wimbledon. Then she lost her 2 matches over the summer. She won 2 out of 3 matches over the summer. So she'd lost 3 out of her last 4 matches. That's not a lot of tennis. And so I think she was trying to kind of call on inspiration and memory more than anything else. And it caught up to her. But it was kind of the right ending. It was a fitting, appropriate ending that this great champion would not have to bow out in the first round and feel somewhat humiliated, but she'd get a couple of wins. And then in the last game of the match, down 5-1 in the third against Tomljanovic, she saved, I believe, 5 match points, and it was spectacular. It was sort of the vintage Serena. It was a fleeting glimpse of Serena in her prime and how she would fight her way out of danger with spectacular shot making when it counted the most. So it was a good ending, I thought. It was a very good ending.
And your sense on Iga, now she's won a French Open, she's won a U.S. Open. How far do you think she can go? How many Grand Slams do you think she can actually win, over her career?
Swiatek?
Yeah.
Oh, she can win many. She gets a little tight. I think she was winning this match over Ons Jabeur in the final, playing some of her best tennis in months, and up a set in 4-2, and then she hit 3-love 4-2. You thought maybe it was going to be a really quick match, and then she had to sort of really buckle down and scrape it out from 5-4 down in the tiebreaker. But that win will do her a lot of good, because it's her first one away from Roland Garros. She'd won Roland Garros for the second time this year, won it also in 2020. Now she's won it on the hard courts, won a major on the hard courts. And she'd had a difficult time after the 37-match streak that you just mentioned, that she had not played well since the French by her standards. So this was really a very important win for her, and a significant step in her career. I'm very encouraged about her. How many majors eventually? Hard to say, but I would expect that she's maybe at least in that 6 to 8 range, somewhere in there.
All right. And we are actually, with the Wild West Tennis Podcast, here we focus, me being in Canada, Bradley being American, but living in Mexico. I tend to focus on the Canadian players. My personal sense that it was a very disappointing tournament for Canadians, barring Rebecca Marino, who reached the third round for the first time in over 10 years. What was your sense on the Canadians? I know Felix, went out in the second round. Bianca went out in the second round. Dennis went the farthest, losing that tough 5-set match to Rublev. Just your thoughts, your analysis on that.
Well, I think that Dennis is an enigma to me. I feel like he's never done himself justice. I feel like I always remember Djokovic going up to him at the 2021 Wimbledon when he got to the semis, and Djokovic beat him in straight, but the first 2 sets were very tight. And he basically went up to him in the locker room to tell him he was convinced that he was going to do something big. And I think Shapovalov appreciated that. But so often he loses to players that I don't think even belong on the court with him. He beats himself. He's a brilliant shot maker, but too sporadic and a little hot-headed. Felix is probably the opposite end of the scale. He's this low-key, cerebral, just a thoughtful guy, and almost too reasonable. Maybe losing doesn't sting enough for him. And I feel like he's got a great all-around game. And in the long term, I kind of like his chances better than Shapovalov's because I've seen what he can do when he's at his best. Had a match point against Medvedev in Australia this year. He's had a couple of really good Wimbledons. He's beaten Zverev at Wimbledon. You know, he's beaten some of the best players. And for him, I don't know exactly what's holding him back. He also has inexplicable losses. But I think in the long run, he's going to do a little bit better than Dennis. Dennis will maybe have that one red-hot major where it all comes together and somehow he wins one. But Felix, I think, will contend consistently for majors in the years ahead. He just has to start avoiding some of these losses that he can't really justify. And, you know, it happened again in New York. So, but I think he's a great talent. Shapovalov too, but Shapovalov, as I say, there's a little bit too much volatility there, you know, and he gets pretty angry with himself and the officials. And he's let opportunities get away, like against Rafa in Australia this year, where Rafa was definitely not at his best at his heat stroke and really struggling on the day. And Dennis couldn't come through there. He lost it in 5. You know, there's been moments that have eluded him, opportunities missed. So long term, I like Felix's chances better. And if Dennis proves me wrong, I'd be thrilled because I love his game.
And Steve, you know that and Elias knows as well, I'm a huge Andreescu fan. I mean, I think she is phenomenal. I think she's interesting. Could you, Steve, speak to her? I know she's been beset with injuries, but give us your thoughts on Andreescu.
Well, listen, Brad, the 2019 Open was one of the most impressive things I've seen. She had won a great semi from Bencic, and then she goes out against Serena. The crowd is going bonkers for Serena, and she wins the first set really confidently. She's got this great return to serve. She, you know, I don't think I've ever seen anybody do a better job returning Serena's second serve than Andreescu did that day. It was just dazzling to watch. And then she went up 5-1 in the second, and you thought she had the match. The nerves came in, but she fended Serena off and broke one more time at the end. She managed to close it out in straight sets, which was not easy to do. It's a major final. The problem with her, as you know, Brad, is she's just hurt much too often. When she's at her best, she would never be outside the top 5 in women's tennis. And if she could stay healthy, we would see her win her share of majors too. My concern about her is strictly the physical side. I think she's got a great temperament, a great attitude, and a phenomenal game with she can do wonderful things off the ground. The serve is good enough. The return of serve is stupendous. But I just think she has been a little too injury prone, and that could be in the end, that could hurt her the most. But if we could get a healthy period for her, she's one of those players that could clearly move past the established order right now and be right in a position to win more majors, because that was no fluke what happened against Serena in New York. She showed she was a great player. And
then what about, Elias should be the one asking this, but I'm going to hijack it. What about, you know who I'm going to ask about, Layla.
Yep.
What about her? You know, last year was runner-up. Sorry, Elias, I had to do it.
No problem.
Layla's a terrific player, left-handed, guileful, you know, crowd pleaser, great fighter. She showed all those outstanding qualities in reaching the final of the U.S. Open a year ago. And like Emma Raducanu, who beat her in the final, they've each had disappointing seasons, but it hasn't been quite as extreme with Layla. She's still been playing reasonably well, and I feel like she'll get back. Next year, again, will be a critical year for her, because she had to live up to what she did at the Open. And even though she didn't win it, people pay attention to you when you're in the finals of a major too. And she was the one who had so many good wins along the way. She's the one that beat Naomi and Svitolina, and she had bigger wins than Raducanu did. So I feel like, she couldn't quite live up to it this year, but I love the feistiness. I like the way she plays the game. It's not built so much on power the way a lot of these other players do. She really knows how to construct points, how to attack. I hope we see the best of her next year, and I suspect we will.
And actually, Steve, I'm going to steal. Bradley was doing Canadian players. I'm going to steal an American player. How impressed are you with Braden Holt and Frances Tiafoe?
Well, okay, let's start with Brandon Holt, the son of Tracy Austin. Brandon Holt goes into the qualifying this year, and I think he and his family were really hoping he could get through it. He got through it beautifully. He won all of his matches in 3 sets. They all went the distance, but he showed the mental toughness down the stretch in every one of those contests to get into the main draw. Then all of us, and I include myself, when I say all of us, I'm referring to myself as well. We didn't give him a great chance against Taylor Fritz in the first round of the Open because Taylor, look, Taylor's a guy that people are talking about could win the tournament. And he came from behind to defeat him in 4 sets. It was really a wonderful win. He ended up losing his next match after winning the first 2 sets, 1 and 2. However, what a splash he made. What a tournament he had. And for him to have just gotten to the qualifying was great. Then he'll learn from, I think that was probably a little depressing to be breezing through a match that he eventually loses in 3 tight sets the rest of the way. But that's okay, because then you realize, okay, I have to treat this guy as seriously as Taylor Fritz, and they're ready to pick me off just as much as I was ready to topple Taylor Fritz. But I like his game. I love his temperament. I mean, he has everything. He's very consistent from the baseline, a good serve, a good mover, and a quietly fierce competitor. So I'm really encouraged about where he's going. Tiafoe, well, I was so surprised, pleasantly so, because he had a great Open last year and he surpassed it this year. He beats Rublev for the 2nd year in a row. Great, tremendous performance against Rafa to beat him in 4 sets as well. So then he ends up in the semis, and again, most of us thought Carlos was going to handle him, and he won a excellently played first set, and then seemed to be fading physically. The next 2.5 sets, he did not look good, and he didn't seem to be moving well. And I thought his legs were turning to jelly. And I just mean, you can see that in a guy. He looked to me like one of those fighters in the middle rounds of the 7th or the 8th round where he's about to be knocked out, and he has to go against the ropes. And if the guy lands one more big punch, he's gone. I thought that's where Alcaraz had him when he went up 2-love and 3-1 in the 4th set. But Tiafoe found a way to win that set, saving a match point, and took it into the 5th and stayed competitive in the 5th. So I think he takes a lot away from this Open. And I hope now his attitude will be, well, I can be the best of the Americans. Taylor's done it, but now I'm going to move past him, and I'm going to make my charge toward the top 10, and I'm going to see where this can take me. Because he took the microphone. He stayed out on the court. He did an interview with Patrick McEnroe. Rarely does the loser do that. Congratulated Alcaraz, but then told the crowd that he was going to come back in the next couple of years and win this tournament. And I don't think those words were empty words. I think he means it. He knows it's going to take continued hard work, but he'll put that work in.
And if I could just add something about Tiafoe, I actually told this to Brad, but I have a story where I was actually at Roland Garros. I remember when he was actually a qualifier, and I had met his coach, and his coach had told me, even after winning his first match of qualifying, watch out, this kid is going to be like the next big American thing. And then over the next couple of years, you heard Andy Roddick speak about him. You heard James Blake speak about him. And really, I really think like he could probably be the next American player. Maybe he win a Grand Slam.
It's possible. It's possible. I'm not convinced. I have to be honest. I'm not convinced. But I'm a lot more encouraged after what we saw at this Open. And then I think one of the keys is going to be to keep putting in the effort every week. He does. I've seen him. He tries hard. But again, he wants to bring about a little bit more consistency, so he climbs those rankings and kind of earns the respect of everybody out there, which he's done in New York. But he wants to prove to his colleagues and his peers that he can play that way almost every week, and he's capable of it because he's pretty. What impressed me against Rafa was that he served so well the whole match, and that from the backcourt, he just wasn't giving anything away. I think Rafa expected a few more gifts than he got, and he also was quite good from the baseline against Alcaraz, except when he got tired. The errors came when he was weary and tired, and he was tired in the 5th when he missed 20 out of 30 first serves because he was having a harder time getting up to the ball, extending. His legs were starting to bother him again, I think. He didn't say that, but I think he was, again, the weariness had come back that had been there in the 3rd set. So, yes, I don't dismiss what you're saying. It's entirely possible he wins a major, but it's going to take continued hard work, and I think he's got to make it happen sometime over the next couple of years. So I'll be watching closely.
Steve, I'd like to ask you about Pagula, who I on this podcast I got a little bold with my prediction that after they reached the quarterfinals. I thought that Pagula and Tiafoe would win the tournament. They didn't. But Steve, if you could speak about Pagula, I haven't seen him play a lot. I admitted that. What's your feeling there with her? Is she top 5 material, and or can she win a major?
Yeah, I think, she's already proven herself. She's already shown or climbed into the top 10. Can she make that next move? Yes, she could. And could she get to the semis or finals of a major? I think so. But winning one is going to be tough. I mean, she played well against Swiatek at the Open, but Swiatek was just too solid in the end. And she could, she was better on defense, and she could attack a little bit better too. She's not a flashy player, Pagula, but boy, she's awfully good. And I love the progress she's made in the last year. And I do expect her to stay in that top 10 quite a while, because she's one of those players who seems to automatically be in most weeks, quarters, semis. The results are going to be pretty reliable for her. She's very professional. She's very tough mentally, and no nonsense kind of girl. And I feel like she's not the most gifted player out there. There's players who are who have more flair and versatility, but boy, she uses everything she's got. And I'm kind of excited about her, Brad. I think that I think she's going to stay in that residence in the top 10 for quite a while, and maybe she will surprise me. I'm not really expecting majors, but I'm expecting her to be deep in majors quite frequently.
And Steve, if I can ask, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the last player to defend their U.S. Open title was Roger Federer. Is that correct, or was it Djokovic?
Defending the U.S. Open?
Yeah. Player was the last time a player won the U.S. Open back-to-back years.
Oh, well, Djokovic has not done that, because he won his first in 2011, then he won it again in 2015, he won it again in 2018.
Right.
It has gone back and forth for a long time. Rafa won it in 17 and 19. Wawrinka won it in 16. Djokovic in 15. Yeah, you have to keep going back. Cilic in 14. Rafa in 13. Murray in 12. We could keep going back. You may be right. I mean, because Djokovic 11, and yeah, it may be. But Roger, of course, once he won his 5th in a row back in 08, he's never won it since. So, he lost to Del Potro in 09, and then Rafa stepped up in 10, and Novak in 11, Murray 12, and back to Rafa in 13. So it is a hard tournament to defend for a lot of different reasons. And frankly, I think Djokovic should have done it somewhere along the line and could have done it, but did not. And but I'm just, tell me your point there. Tell me what.
So how could, in your mind, what do you think it's so difficult to win that tournament back to back? It's the
last major of the year. Everybody's priming for it. They know that it's the last one of the season. It's on hard courts where everybody plays well. It's in New York, a lot of heat, and it's a grueling tournament. It's almost as tough physically in its way as Roland Garros, because of the pounding their bodies take on the hard courts. And it's the end of summer, and yeah, I mean, I think some of it is coincidental, as I say. It's not as if Rafa wasn't capable of defending, but he did it in 17 and 19. He did it in 10 and 13. It's not like Novak he should have won many more Opens than he did. So some of it is just timing and whether they happen to be injured at that time. Djokovic was hurt in 19 and had to retire against Wawrinka, and he had won it in 18, could well have defended it. So I think that it's one of those things you can't fully explain, except to say that everybody is extra eager for that event coming at the end of the Grand Slam season.
And Steve, this will be my last question for you, and it's one that I haven't heard anyone really talk about. It looked on television. I got to see the match on TV. That it was raining the day of the final. What factor did the roof play in helping this tournament?
Well, I don't think it made a difference in terms of, and like for the final, I don't think that was an advantage to Carlos over Ruud, for instance. And
okay, yeah.
No, I mean, it's as you know, Brad, it's a very high roof. It's way up there.
Yeah.
I don't believe, and I don't think this condition suddenly, like Wimbledon's is a bit different. It could get a little more humid in there. I don't think it was to anybody's advantage. I think the advantage is to everybody because the players know they're not going to be delayed. I mean, you take a year like 2015 with Novak and Roger in the finals, and they were all set to go on the court. It'd been a beautiful day, all day long, sunny weather, just the kind you like, Brad. And what should happen? It starts raining about 5 minutes before the match. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And they were delayed 3 hours. 3 hours. And then the next year we had the roof. So my point is, I think it just gives everybody peace of mind. And I don't think anybody goes in there saying, even Rafa, who does not enjoy, who's had this history of not liking playing indoors, I sense that he doesn't mind this roof. And he's fine playing under this roof. And they certainly like the idea that they don't have to sit around and wait. That's the most important thing.
And one final question from me, Steve, if I may. You've been going to this tournament a very long time. Do you want to give your personal experience as a reporter there?
Personal experience.
That's another podcast. That's another 30 minutes.
Yeah, no. If you could narrow that for me, I know what you're getting at, but give it.
What was your experience like, personal experience at the U.S. Open this year?
Well, no, I mean, look, I just would say that for me personally, as an American reporter who happens to live a 1 hour drive away from the site, it's a nice feeling to each day be heading out from home and to know you're driving back home every night. It's also exhilarating because I just feel like the New York crowds, it reminds me somewhat of Paris, but there's a different flavor in New York, that there's just the excitement of the American sports fans who come out there, many of them not as educated as the Wimbledon fans, by the way, or the Australian fans either. But they love the festive nature of the event, and they know it's America's most important tennis tournament, and there's great excitement surrounding us. So for me as a reporter, just nice to be a part of that, because when I go to the other majors, you're going to hotels and you're either walking over from your hotel or whatever your transportation is. There's always that added element, and while here it's really home. I mean, it's in my state. It's in New York City. I live in Westchester County, so it's a very short, easy drive, and I just enjoy it because I take a lot of pride in it as an American reporter, to see so many people paying attention to this sporting festival that's celebrated by so many fans from other sports who wouldn't pay attention to tennis at any other time but now. Maybe Wimbledon, maybe, but the Open is when they're really tuned in as Americans.
Thank you so much, Steve. For Brad, I'm Elias Laradi. Thank you guys so much. Like, subscribe, find us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on YouTube. And thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Well, thanks for having me.